Can you do one of the hardest jobs in the country when your own brain is actively working against you? Because that is the question I answer every single morning. And today I'm going to show you exactly what that looks like from the inside. Because I teach with ADHD, anxiety, and mild depression. And nobody in my building knows about any of what I'm going to be saying in this video. But the reason I'm making this video is that last week, something happened during a lesson observation that nearly exposed everything. And I have never told anyone about it until right now. So let me take you back to this morning. Before I walked into college, I sat in my car in the car park for about 11 minutes with the engine off, just sitting there because my chest was tight and my thoughts were racing. And I needed my body to calm down enough that I could walk through that door and teach. And here is an analogy that I think anyone watching this will understand, not just teachers. You know when your phone is at 3% battery and it starts foreclosing apps to survive. Like the screen dims and notifications stop, and it is technically still on, but it is running on emergency power. That is what my brain does some mornings. It is technically on, but it is in power saving mode. And the problem is that in 15 minutes, I need it to run on full capacity for 30 teenagers, and I am sitting in a car park running at 3%. And here is the thing that makes this relevant to anybody watching. Not just people in education, because if you've ever sat in a car park or on a toilet cubicle or in a stairwell or any small quiet space before walking into a room full of people who need you to be fine, you already know what exactly I am trying to describe here. And the only difference is the job title. So quick context, my name is Daniel with over 13 years in the travel and tourism industry. I've got a master's degree in aviation management and I teach travel and tourism in a further education college here in the UK. At the same time, I co-founded a charity called Elkins Light that works in maternity safety. So on paper, I have my life together. Some days, that is true. And the reason I wanted to start this channel is that in FE, we talk constantly about supporting learners with additional needs. Nobody's actually asking the same questions about the person standing at the front. And there are about 54,000 FE lecturers in the country. And that conversation does not exist. Therefore, I decided I would start it myself. Let me tell you what my 3 conditions actually look like, not from a textbook, but from this past week. The ADHD runs everything. Imagine you have a car with an incredible engine, genuinely powerful, but the ignition is broken. So sometimes you turn the key and the ignition rolls and you can build a full 90-minute lesson in one sitting. But other times you just turn that key and absolutely nothing happens. And no amount of turning it harder changes anything. Therefore, the lesson gets planned at 11 at night because deadline panic finally forces the engine over. The anxiety is more physical than anyone realizes. Before almost every lesson, my chest tightens, my hands go numb, my palms sweat, and my brain runs worst case scenarios. And here is a fact that changed how I think about this. Anxiety is statistically wrong almost 100% of the time. Like I have been anxious before thousands of lessons and the catastrophe it predicted has never once actually happened. But it is so convincing in the moment that your body responds as if the threat is real. And therefore you use energy fighting a ghost, which means you walk into the lesson already depleted before a single student has opened their mouth. And here is the reframe that genuinely changed how I see all 3. Everyone assumes ADHD, anxiety, and depression make you worse at your job. And I believe that for years, but research shows that ADHD brains process social cues in group settings significantly faster than neurotypical brains. Which means the thing I was most afraid of, standing in front of 30 unpredictable teenagers, turns out to be the environment where my brain performs at best. The condition I spent years hiding might be the reason I am good at this job. Alright, 5 specific moments from my working week that illustrates what all of this actually looks like. So it is about 4:30 in the afternoon and I am sitting at my desk and I need to tell you what this looks like because I need you to see it to be able to understand it. The lesson plan for tomorrow morning is open on my laptop. The unit specification is right next to it. I have got a cup of tea beside me that I have made about 40 minutes ago and I've not touched. And my resources folders is right there and everything I need in it. And I have produced absolutely nothing, not a slide, not an activity, not a single word. And have been sitting here for over an hour. And here's what I need you to understand, because this is the part that people who do not have ADHD genuinely cannot grasp. It is not that I do not know what to do. I know exactly what this lesson needs. The lesson is completely designed inside my head, but my brain will not let me start building it. And the best analogy I can give you is imagine you are sitting in a car with a sat-nav and you know exactly where you need to go. But the sat-nav will not press start. It just sits there showing you the map and refusing to calculate the root. And no amount of pressing the button changes anything. And that is executive dysfunction. It's not laziness and it's not poor time management. It is a neurological war between knowing what to do and actually doing it. And that one will not respond to willpower or motivation or deadlines until the deadline is so close that the panic itself becomes the ignition. Therefore, what happens is that the lesson gets planned at 11 o'clock at night in a frantic 2-hour burst, because at 11 o'clock, the deadline is close enough that my brain finally treats it as if it's an emergency and the execution function kicks in. Reason why I call it panic productivity. And here's the thing that makes it so confusing. The work is good. Sometimes it is genuinely excellent, and therefore nobody around me has any idea that it was produced in survival mode, because the output looks professional even though the process was chaotic. But here is what is at stake with that pattern. If every lesson gets planned in emergency mode at midnight, eventually something slips through. A resource that is not quite finished, a differentiation that is not quite thought through, a timing that is slightly off, and on most days, that does not matter because you adjust in real time. But on the day that an observer walks into your room, which is exactly what happened to me last Thursday, you need the lesson to be airtight. And the midnight lesson is good, but it is not airtight. And I'll tell you what happened in a minute. Now, here is something that might genuinely surprise you, because the actual teaching, the standing in front of 30 students and delivering a lesson, is not the hard part of my day. It is the best part of my day. And I mean that. When I'm in that room and there is energy and questions flying, and I am thinking on my feet and reading the room and pivoting activities in real time, my brain is fully alive. Like ADHD is an actual advantage in those moments because it means I process group dynamics faster than most people and I thrive on unpredictability. And there are moments in a lesson where I feel like the best version of myself, like this is the thing I was supposed to do all my life. And then the lesson ends and the students leave and the door closes and it's like someone reached inside me and pulled the plug out. My focus dissolves and I need about 15 minutes of doing absolutely nothing before I can form a complete thought. But the timetable does not give you that, because there's another group in 20 minutes or a meeting or a conversation with a colleague in the corridor that needs you to be present for. Therefore, you push through the crash every single time. And by the end of a full teaching day, you might crash 3 or 4 times and push through it every single one. All right. This one is going to sound ridiculous and I need you not to judge me. A couple of weeks ago, I set a 20-minute group activity. I circulated, I helped a few tables. I got into a really good conversation with one group about their coursework. And then I looked at the clock and 40 minutes had passed. 40 minutes. I had lost 20 minutes of my own lesson without noticing. When I looked around the room, about a third of the students had finished the task and were sitting there nothing, and another third had moved to the conversations about their weekend. And you genuinely cannot believe it because it felt like 20 minutes. That is time blindness. It's not that you lose track of time. It is that your internal clock runs at a completely different speed to the real clock. And when you are engaged in something, 15 minutes and 40 minutes feel identical. Time blindness is not a metaphor. It is a clinically documented feature of ADHD. The ADHD brain has a measurably impaired sense of time duration. The workaround is external systems. What I use is 3 silent phone alarms per lesson. One at the activity start, one 5 minutes before the activity should end, and one at the end. And I check my watch compulsively, like to a degree that would look obsessive to anyone watching. And it mostly works. The admin spiral is what happens when your brain gets no stimulation at all. And the two problems feel completely different from the inside, even though from the outside, they both look like someone sitting at the desk not doing anything. So teaching is about half the job. And the other half is emails and registers and tracking sheets and IQA, paperwork, and schemes of work, and marking with detailed written feedback. And for a neurotypical brain, all of that is boring but manageable. You sit down, you work through it, you go home. But for an ADHD brain, admin is the hardest thing in the entire job. Harder than behavior management, harder than observations, harder than anything else, because there is no stimulation in it. No urgency, no immediate reward, no human interaction. Therefore, the brain essentially decides that admin does not exist. And here's where it turns into a spiral, because the anxiety is always watching. The ADHD ignores the admin, but the anxiety notices everything I have not done. Every unanswered email becomes a piece of evidence in my head that I am failing. Every late tracking sheet becomes proof that I am not a real professional. The ADHD creates the backlog and the anxiety punishes me for it. And that cycle, that specific feedback loop, runs in the background of my brain every single working day. And here's the analogy that I think captures it. The fifth one is the moment where all of the workarounds almost failed at once. And it happened in front of someone whose job it was to grade my performance. All right, so this is the one I told you about at the beginning. The one I've never said out loud before. And before I tell you what happened, I need you to understand the stakes, because an observation in further education is when someone from management or quality sits at the back of your lesson with a clipboard or a laptop and watches you teach for an hour and grades your performance. And that grade goes onto your professional record and it affects your standing in the college. So it was one of the Thursdays in my lesson, and I am about 20 minutes into a lesson. And then the lesson is going fine. The students are working and the energy in the room is good. And then I hear the door at the back of the room open. And I do not need to turn around to know what is happening, because I can feel the energy in the room shifts. That tiny recalibration that happens when an adult who is not supposed to be there walks in. And I glance over my shoulder and I see the clipboard. And in that moment, everything changes. And what happens in my body over the next 3 or 4 seconds is this. My heart rate spikes, not gradually, instantly. And I feel it in my chest and in my throat and in my fingertips. And my mouth goes completely dry, like someone has just put cotton wool in it. And my palms start sweating. And the lesson I planned, the one I built at midnight in a panic burst, suddenly feels incredibly fragile. Like it is made of tissue paper, and one wrong move from me will tear the whole thing apart. And here's what anxiety does in that moment that I think is genuinely cruel. Because I know what good teaching looks like. I do it every single day. I have done it for years. But anxiety does not care about your track record. It does not care about your qualifications. It does not care about the hundreds of lessons that went well before this one. It just sits there in the back of your head and it says, this is the time. This is when the mask comes off. This is when they look closely enough to see that you have been performing competence this entire time and you are not actually this person. But here's what I did, and I need you to hear this part because I think it matters. I taught the lesson. I hit every single objective. I differentiated for 3 ability levels. I checked understanding at every transition point. I managed behavior without even raising my voice. I built on students' responses, and I walked around the room like I was completely and utterly in control. And when the observer left and the door closed behind them, I sat down at my desk and my hands shook, not a little bit, properly, visibly, and they shook for about 5 minutes while I was sat there trying to breathe normally. And then the next class started filing in and I had to stand up and do all that all over again. I think this is the thought that will resonate with anyone watching this who has ever performed competence while falling apart inside. Because that observation went well. They gave me positive feedback. They told me that the lesson was well structured and the students were engaged. And I've started calling that gap the gap between what people see and the performance tax. It is the price you pay for being good at hiding what you are carrying. If anything I have described sounds like your life, subscribe right now. Everything on this channel is for this. And the reason I'm telling you this is because I am certain someone watching this did the exact same thing today and has never heard another person describe it. So let me say it clearly. I see you, not because I have an answer, but because I am doing it too. The things I thought made me worse actually made me better. I read rooms fast, I pivot without thinking, and I understand struggle because I live it. Therefore, the answer I asked at the beginning, can you do one of the hardest jobs in the country when your brain is working against you? The answer is yes. But it costs something, and that cost has a new name now. It is the performance tax, and it deserves to be talked about. This channel is called The Unseen Lecturer, and it exists because this conversation does not happen anywhere else. ADHD, dyslexia, anxiety, autism, grief, depression, the things you carry into work that can never make it onto a CV or an observation form. Next week, I am sharing 5 exact sentences from managing students' behavior when your brain is too empty to improvise. Word for word, the scripts that saved me on my worst days. Subscribe, comment if you recognized yourself. Send this to someone who pays the performance tax every day and has never had a name for it. Keep showing up.